I know. Okay, can you hear me okay? Can. Yes, not a problem. No, yo tampoco sé. Te voy a hacer host, pero entonces no puedo. Okay. So welcome. It's going to get cooler shortly. So a little bit of house rules. I hope you're all signed in. And the toilets are by the door. So it's not the, you come out to the left, it's not the first door, it's the second door near to where the entrance is. Okay. Are we all ready? Yes, we're all ready. Yeah, they. So we are starting the ATC4, and you have some water and fruits by the door too. We'll have coffee at 10:30. So we have two sessions in the morning, two sessions in the morning before coffee. Then we have another session. Then we have lunch. And there's been a change in the agenda because the people from the German Development Institute could not make it. So we're going to have electronics watch, Kate and Peter over there after lunch. And we're going to have tomorrow's session. In the first session, we're going to move it for today afternoon. So we're going to have the game today afternoon, and tomorrow you can sleep a little bit later. Okay, great. So I know that most of you have been posting on LinkedIn about what you think about sustainable development and sustainability is. We haven't had the opportunity to post on LinkedIn, so we thought, why not? Let's take the opportunity to trouble you and torture you with our perspective on sustainable development and sustainability. And that's chapter 2 of this book. Yes, I'm promoting my own work, by the way. Somebody has to do it, otherwise I don't get any royalties from that. So most important is that many people think we're doing bad. Yes, we're doing bad in many ways, but we're doing also very good in many ways. We have had a huge increase in economic activities, and you see there from $2.4 trillion in 1900 to 6.3 to 46, and then we've gone up and then down and up and down, depending on a cycle of crisis that we've had, 2007, and now with the COVID crisis. We have had a large growth of industrial outputs, over 50 times during the past century, especially after the Second World War. We have had a rise of individual income, quite good. So if you think about your parents and your grandparents, by the time that you're in your own age, you're probably making more money than they were back then. If you think of Sweden, for example, 100 years ago, Sweden was a very, very poor country. It was mainly a rural country, and people were emigrating to the US. Now Sweden is a quite loud, wealthy country in that sense. So many people have become rich and rich. We also had a huge international trades, especially after the fall of the Berlin Wall and the opening of China. So once China opened and the Berlin Wall, right? Oh, so once China opened and the Berlin Wall fell down, we started having a lot of international goods trade. Now it's changing a little bit with the situation that we have in Eastern Europe. We also have huge increase in agricultural output. So from 14 million tons in 1950 to 134 million tons. And we also increased the yield per hectare. So we went from 1.6 to 2.78 in 2000. So if you consider that, is almost doubling the agricultural output. We've also been inventing so many great things in the last 50 years. So for example, color television, that one, DVD and Blu-ray, and many of us are not even using DVD and Blu-ray anymore. We go for live streaming. Lasers, nice machines like this. We have microwaves, We have barcodes and scanners. We have ATMs or cash points, depending on where you're from. So cash points in the UK, ATMs in the rest of the world. We have space exploration, magnetic resonance imaging, really good, especially if you broke a bone or something like that, or tear a ligament. DNA testing and sequencing. Now you can know if you're half Irish or half Belgian or half Chinese or something like that. We have birth control pill, also very important since the late 1960s. We have some of those examples there. We've also had nice computers. Yeah. So if you think about 20, 30 years ago, a laptop would you have to carry it in your bag and you were going like this. We've had the microprocessor, really important. We've had the mobile phone, really nice. Yeah. Sometimes we have even 2 or 3. We have GPS and sat-nav that some of you were not using in the morning. Yeah. We have the internet. By the way, internet password over here, in case you don't get edu wrong. We have email, online shopping, e-commerce, very important, green chemistry. For all of those of you who are non-lawyers, as we like to call you, but also for you lawyers, because we have a lot of different laws in green chemistry. And the guy who wrote the foreword for this book is the grandfather of REACH, chemistry regulation in Europe. He wrote the foreword over here. We have photovoltaic, solar energy, and biofuels, and a lot of those things. So, hey, no, we're doing pretty well, right? Well, not so great, because that has come at different costs. So we have, for example, economic disparity and political instability. And you can see that, for example, in Haiti, has been a big problem. You have Haiti and Dominican Republic. Dominican Republic is doing so, not too bad, but Haiti just crossed the border and it's a mess. We can see that also at the moment with Ukraine and Russia, the big political instability on both countries, and that's spelling to other different parts of the world. We have marginalization. Think, for example, in Brazil, think Mexico, think Thailand, Indonesia. We have consumption. And we're not talking about consumption as in the beginning of the 19th century, that means tuberculosis. We're talking about overconsumption, as in the US, great parts of the US, and underconsumption. So even in some parts of the US, we have underconsumption. India is underconsuming, Somalia is underconsuming, so we have to look at both parts, not just overconsumption, blame it on the Americans. We have to look at both parts. We look into bribery and corruption. And you're a guest in one of the least corrupted countries in the world. And I remark by saying least. It doesn't mean it's not. A couple of years ago, 3 years ago, we had a problem where the husband of the chairperson, the chairwoman of the Swedish Academy of Sciences was doing some shady tricks, and the Swedish Academy of Science, the main person, had to resign because of those things. So there's a lot of corruption in many different parts of the world, not only in the south, not only in the north. In every part we can find corruption. Of course, in some countries it's in your face corruption. In some, it's not, a little bit hidden. We have the disproportionate income distribution between the rich countries and the poor countries. So if you consider Sweden and you consider, for example, South Africa, just two opposites. We are very rich compared to South Africa, but South Africa is the richest country in all of Africa. And you're like, whoa, hold on a minute. But if you look in South Africa itself, you'll still see that there's major gaps between whites and blacks, and whites between blacks and blacks between blacks, and then becomes very messy. We have a huge problem with external debt that even Winston Churchill in the 1940s, 1950s said, why don't we cancel it? Because the UK owes money to the US owes money to the UK, they both owe money now to China, and China owes money to Japan, and Japan owes money to the US. Why don't you just cancel the external debt? But we're still having big problems with external debt. Major problem in the US, for example, it goes to trillions of dollars. This is a ratio of the richest 20% to the poorest 20%. As you see here, is gone from 30 to 61. And I think in the book, I provide some more data, and it's gone to 90 to 1. And you see here also, we have the worst population rates by income. So they have the richest one and the distribution of income. So the richest one receive 82.7%, whilst the poorest ones receive 1.4. Let me see if you can, yeah, that's a little bit better, right? This is from Oxfam, it's a little bit old, but you can see here that they were projecting that in 2015, the 1% in the whole world would have exactly the same amount of money as the 99%. That was a projection of some years ago, and we've passed that. So the one, if you're ultra rich, you have more money than the rest of the 99%. We have also a lot of environmental issues. You have global energy and use and security. I was very mad yesterday. I had to put my petrol in my hybrid car. 2 years ago, I was filling it up with about 500 crowns, 450. That's about 45 euros. And yesterday was 75 euros. I'm like, oh, price of petrol has gone massively up, and we're not talking about heating in Spain and Italy. That's Poland, for example, has become really problematic at the moment. We have climate change and global warming. That we have over 450 parts per million. When I was finishing my first degree, we were at 250. That's probably because I was finishing my first degree when Queen Victoria was still alive, but that's another problem. Okay, we have here a global, this is a glacier in Argentina, yes, but it's the same happening in Switzerland, that we have problems that our glaciers are disappearing, and that's in the same season, just 50 years apart. Nitrogen loading is when we use a lot of pesticides and fertilizers in our soils, and then we have overload of nitrogen, really bad for the soil, and then you have to clean it and wait for a lot of time. We have natural resource deterioration. We have loss of biodiversity. Look in Brazil in the Amazons, for example, it's a major catastrophe over there because we want to have more beef. So we put the beef in the Amazon, let's cut the forest. It's really great. We have pollution. And I have to say that Sweden is one of the least polluted countries I've lived in. The UK, especially London, is not very clean, but it used to be much worse back in the 1970s. So if you were to go out with a white suit in the 70s in London, a little bit of rain and your suit will become gray, if not black. We have growing water scarcity, major problem in many countries, Spain, Italy, Middle East, major problem. We have unsafe groundwater, major problem in the US, because of all the fertilizers and insecticides that you've been using, they end up in the groundwater, and then you have to clean the water before you drink the water. Here in Sweden, you practically you need to check that the water is safe to drink, but you don't clean it. You take it from the lakes and you drink it. In most places, I'm not very sure about Stockholm, but most places you do that. But in the US, you have to clean it before you drink it. We have desertification, and that's one of my favorite ones, but it has to have two S's, not with one S. So it has to be desertification. So we want to have a lot of desert, especially if they're Italian or Austrian. Germans, not so great, but that's a major problem. If you consider that the Sahara Desert was not a desert, it was crowded and it was forested. Ireland was completely forested, and they cut down all the trees in Ireland to make ships for the British Navy. Spain was all forested. So you had a squirrel that could go from Andalusia all the way to Asturias, jumping from tree to tree. Now, no. Deforestation and soil degradation, we have artificial chemicals, and that is not Photoshop. That is what happens when you take a lot of artificial chemicals. If you're a frog. But if you're not, well, if you're a frog and the prince kisses you, what was it? Something like that. But how many of you drank milk today in the morning? You know that there's artificial chemicals in the milk? You know how many things they put in cows? And Europe is highly controlled. You go to the US, and that's even worse. So we're all taking artificial chemicals unwillingly. And we have plastic pollution of the seas that's becoming a major problem in the last 5 to 10 years. And we have a lot of pictures like that. Little friend over there. Wow. In 1 year, we will add 50 million tons of carbon, that's dioxide and monoxide, to the atmosphere. And you see it in the number of ppms growing, CO2 ppms. Destroy 115 square miles of tropical forest. Create 72 square miles of desert. That would be nice, huh? Eliminate between 40 to 100 species. And although we are finding new species from time to time, there's still a problem of the ones that are being eliminated. Erode 71 million tons of topsoil. Add 2,700 tons of chlorofluorocarbides to the atmosphere. These were forbidden in 1987, Montreal Protocol, and we're still adding them to the atmosphere. So what's happening there? We increased the population by 263,000 people. Population of Gävle is about 100,000 people. So 2.63 times every year. We have the carbon emissions in one chart. We have friends from China, Russia, US, the rest of the world, and India. These have not signed the Kyoto Protocol, and they're not planning to sign it anytime soon. And I'm not blaming the people, I'm blaming the governments. We also have a number of social issues. We have poverty and extreme poverty. You can see this in South Africa, but you can see it in Southeast Asia. You can see it in South America, Central America. You can also see it in some parts of Italy. Not exactly like that, but you can see it in some parts of Italy. We have undernourishment and food security. We have diseases and epidemics, and we're just coming out of one of those. But soon we might be entering another one. So don't be kissing any monkeys, please. We have population growth, major problem. We have elderly people. So if you look at countries, for example, Estonia, Singapore, Japan, we have major problems with aging population where the pyramid is inverted. The population pyramid is completely inverted. So we have a problem on how we're going to pay the pensions of the old people later on. We have illiteracy. And would you believe that there's only one country in the whole world that has 0% illiteracy? Only one country. Which one do you think it is? Finland? No? Cuba. It's the only country. Or socialism? Or yes, at FICA. We have hunger, and by hunger we mean not, oh, I'm a little bit peckish, as the Brits would say. No, you're talking about several days of not being able to eat anything. Don't worry, we will provide some fika for you, and there's some fruit outside, and there's things like that. We have gender differences, major issues, and Maria has been publishing things on gender issues, and she's running a research topic, right? Still open on gender issues and sustainability. So if any of you are interested in that, talk to her later on after fika. We have major problems of arms trade and warfare. One of the biggest, most profitable companies in the world has been Kalashnikov. They make some very nice products, very resilient products, and then they sell licenses to many other countries, and that becomes a big problem. And they end up usually in the wrong hands. Okay. We also have what we call cross-cutting issues. Talk about responsibility, economic, environmental, and social responsibility. We talk about governance. We talk about the interrelatedness amongst economic, environmental, and social issues. We talk about also the short, the long, and the longer term effects. This is an example of interconnections. You remember the one that I showed you on richness and income distribution? So we have percentage of CO2 emissions by world population, but this one is connecting CO2 to wealth. So we have the richest 10% are responsible for almost half of total lifestyle consumption emissions. So 10% are responsible for 50%. And then we have the 1% or the poorest 50% are responsible only for 10%. And this is where we start looking at sustainability into not just economic or environmental or social, or what we call in my research group, the time dimension. And the time dimension means from the Bloomberg report, this generation and future generation. But we also have to look at past generations. So the history of Italy is not the same history as Germany, and it's not the same as Sweden. So we cannot look into sustainability in exactly the same way. And these are all the things that I've been telling you about. So we have 30, but we can always add more to this table. And what we talk about cross-cutting aspects, cross-cutting issues, is those that really are connecting. And that's very important for my research group and for sustainability. Not just thinking about, oh, CO2 emissions, yeah, but who's emitting those ones? How can we tell India at the moment that they shouldn't be emitting more CO2 when they have other things to do? And if they do that, oh, you're going to improve social issues, but then you're going to damage environmental issues. And that's when you start thinking, oh my gosh, this is becoming a little bit more complex. Have I depressed you enough? Yes. Okay. So Maria is going to depress you a little bit.
I will try. So let's talk a little bit about sustainability and sustainable development. Sustainable development has its origin in this publication, Silvicultura Economica, that you can see here, that it was about managing forests, but in a more sustainable way. So the idea was to use the forest for many years, but let regenerate in the soil. And then this concept appear in some other places. Some of them, you already know them, for example, different conferences in the Brandon Report, the Rio Conference, Johannesburg Conference, and of course, we have these Millennial Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals. This is a really famous definition. Humanity has the ability to make development sustainable, to ensure that it meets the needs of the present without compromise the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And as you know, it's from the Brandon Report. As Rodrigo said, during the last decades, there have been a number of problems that we are trying to solve. Problems related to economic issues, environmental issues, social issues, and we are doing efforts. We need to do more, but we are on our way. And sustainability is aimed to address all these negative impacts. Many people use sustainable development and sustainability as synonyms, but they are different. Sustainable development is more like a path, as a way to going to somewhere, and this place sustainability, that is our goal, and this is a dynamic goal, because we are reassessing this goal every day, and we want more and more. These are some examples of sustainable development principles, and all of us, we are working with many of them in our everyday. So, for example, promoting and protection of fundamental human rights. Olga and Lorena are working on that, or peace and security, open and democratic society, involvement, participation and collaboration of citizens. More, for example, some of them related to the environment, protection of the integrity of the environment, equal access to resources, etc. These are some examples of sustainable development drivers. And we are really familiar, for example, to these first ones, to these regulatory changes that we know in this project that this could make a change. Regulatory changes that help, for example, to reduce production, minimize pollution, etc. Or changes in governments. Universities' commitments, working as a group to reach some of these issues, or proposing by business leaders to help solve some of these problems that Rodrigo mentioned before. We have, as you know, these sustainable development goals that were created by governments to governments, but we are trying to contribute to them, and we are trying to understand how can we contribute to them, because sometimes, as we will talk tomorrow in the collaboration lecture, sometimes we can contribute to them directly, and sometimes indirectly as an organization, as a citizens. So we will talk about this tomorrow a little bit more. And then, Rodrigo, we will talk to you about different sustainability perspectives.
I'm just becoming also, I need a break from time to time. So as I mentioned, it's not the same to have a sustainability in Italy, in Germany, or in Sweden. And there's been a number of ways that we've been addressing sustainability. As Maria said, it's been, I mean, the original term Nachhaltigkeit in Germany, it was forgotten and it was picked up and then this and that, but there's been a lot of interpretations and different ways that we look at it from academia. And I know that many of you might have one or another way. So that's what we are having here. And there's a number, I'm just going to mention some of those. One is the focus, the other was engaging with stakeholders. So if you were in my session in ATC3, you might have remember something or learn something. We have constituency proposed by Mebratu. He's from Nigeria, I think, but maybe not from Nigeria. He's from Africa, but I can't remember from which country. We have the trends proposed by Hopwood, Mellor, and O'Brien, and we have the perspectives proposed by somebody you might know. Somebody who doesn't have much to do and just keeps on writing things. So on the focus one, we have the anthropocentric. And this one is pretty much saying we are the center of the world. We people are the center of the world, and then everything has to be surrounded around us. Okay. We have the technocentric. So technology is going to solve all of our problems. And that's pretty much coming out from engineering schools, science schools, saying, oh, solar cells, hybrid cars, electric cars, life cycle assessment. We solve everything with technology. Is it right? Is it wrong? Well, there are different perspectives on looking at things. They are very useful on trying to reduce some things, but then we have to combine it with other perspectives. We'll see later on life cycle assessment, eco-efficiency, eco-effectiveness, and things like that. We have also the ecocentric. That is people who are saying the environment is the most important and the rest is not important. So we need to create natural reserves that nobody goes in there, nobody uses it. And that sometimes is a good idea. Sometimes it's a really bad idea because then nothing gets renewed. But those are different types of focus on sustainability. We have also engaging with stakeholders that we divided into weak sustainability and strong sustainability. And some of you might have heard about this one before. No? Yeah? No? Yeah? Okay. Weak sustainability, it takes much more of a functionalistic approach. So we use negotiation, we use different stakeholders, we use communication, collaboration that we're going to be talking about tomorrow, in order to make sure that everybody kind of evolves towards where we want to be, and we don't restrict it. So it's much more based on those type of collaboration, social improvement, etc., etc. And then we have strong sustainability. Strong sustainability is based on the conservation of nature, and that comes from saying, we are only going to make that natural reserve, and that's it. Nobody can use it, and that's it. So there's no way. We put the regulation, and we are not going to enter into a conversation with companies or with the community in order to move forward. It's good in some cases, as the other one is good in some cases, but we need to be aware, especially since you're all doing PhDs, or where you're standing in sustainability. So you're writing a paper, is it more on the weak sustainability approach or the strong sustainability approach? Okay. This would be much more feasible if we had a world that is equitable, and that has no gender differences, that has no social differences, has low levels of illiteracy, little no poverty, no hunger, blah, blah, blah. But that's more or less utopian at the moment. We have what we call constituency. That's from, I think, Mebratu. Yes. No, that's not from Mebratu. And we divide it into institutional, ideological, and academic. The institutional is based on need satisfaction and goal maximization within the three systems. So we talk about the needs of this generation and the future generation in economic, environmental, and social. We talk about also the ideological, based on several ideologies like liberation theology, radical feminism, ecofeminism, eco-socialism, Marxism, and much more radical in that sense. I'm not saying the right, I'm not saying the wrong, I'm saying that's not another position. And its main assumption is that we all humans act greedily and corruptly because of the socioeconomic system, and not because we are inherently like that, and that nature cannot be dominated but planned and controlled. That's what they posit, these authors, and they say, this is it, and this is how we can move forward. We also have the academic part that is based mainly on ecological, sociological, and economical disciplines, and then we try to put it together. And we transform that into a commodity. So what is the current price of a ton of CO2? Anybody knows? No, but that's more or less what they're proposing. So you price things. You do. What's the price? 20 euros, he says. You give more, 80?
Yeah.
100 sold. Okay. And we take those ones and we put a price on CO2. We put a price on whales. Yeah, the animal. No, Japanese like to eat whales. And you need to price them. Yeah, you need to price them. How do you price them? And should you really stop something that is cultural or not? And that's when you enter into these discussions, saying, well, what comes first, environment or culture? What is more important? Or should you just restrict it for some times, or what do we do? Okay, so we talk about SOx cap, sulfur oxides, CO2, Kyoto protocols, etc., etc. Then we have the Hopwood et al. Approach, that we have the techno-centered approaches from virtually more to eco-center, and we have an increasing socioeconomic well-being, and we go from the longboard, the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, OECD. Then we have up here the socio-ecology, ecofeminism movements. We have deep ecology down here. We have the Brundtland report over here. So we have the transformation, reform, status quo, and there's a number of different parts over there. We have also the sustainability perspectives that you can find, as I said, over here. We have the conventional economies perspective. We have the non-environmental degradation, the integrational, the intergenerational, and the holistic perspective. Okay. On the conventional economies perspective, we say sustainability is a steady state. And you will find a lot of politicians talking about sustainability. But they don't mean sustainability. What they mean is viability. And you are in your entire right, because you're doing a PhD in sustainable public procurement, to tell them, no, you're wrong. You're talking about viability, not sustainability. Viability is about sustained growth and self-sufficiency. It's not about economic, environmental, social, and the time dimension, and how they all interlink. And we try to simplify everything into terms of natural and social phenomena. As I said, as an implied, it neglects environmental and social issues. This is pretty much about money, money, money. Show me the money. Yeah. We have the non-environmental degradation, and that tends to be represented by this concentric circles graph. Tends to be, not only, where we say that we have the economy that is inside society, and then society is inside the environment. And it's usually represented by environmental economics. And those are Daly and Constanzo, for example. They're two of the most known economists on this side. They said resources are scarce, consumption cannot be continued indefinitely, natural resources should be used without surpassing the carrying capacities, and environmental capital should not be depleted. It has mainly environmental connotations, of course, but it tends to neglect the other ones. Okay. We have the integrational perspective, and I'm sure many of you have seen this representation of sustainability, right? Yes. And that one, you see there's a full there, and it means that full sustainability is only achieved in the intersection of the three circles. And then we have partial sustainability in the different ones, and then everything that is outside of that is not sustainability. But at the moment, the way that we are going, everything that we do has consequences to the economic, environmental, social, and the time dimensions, everything that we do. So that kind of becomes limited in this perspective. And as I said, the integration of economic, environmental, social is quite good in many ways, because you can tell people, yeah, we have 3 dimensions, we have to deal with these 3 dimensions. But you are sustainability scholars, you need to go 1 or 2 steps beyond this. There are overlaps, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily balanced. Doesn't mean that the economic circle is the same size as the environmental circle and the social circle. It is much more complete than the previous 2, but it also tends to neglect this generation, next generation, and future generations. So what does the time dimension come into play in this one? And this is another representation where we have sustainable in the middle. We have equitable here, and this is the economic part, this is the environmental part, and this is the people part. I didn't draw this one, I would have put green here and red here or something like that. This is bearable, this is viable, okay? And this is profit. It's another way of representing. Then we have the intergenerational perspective that we've already covered that one. Maria told you about that, Brundtland report, 1987. This generation, next generation, and past generations, okay? And that focuses on the time perspective. If you read the Brundtland report, how many of you have read the entire Brundtland report? All of it. All of it. Okay? Read all of it, because most people just read 1 or 2 pages and they read the definition, but they miss out the accident in Chernobyl. major problem. The problems on Exxon Valdez. And now you're looking at me like, how old are you? I told you I was doing my degree when Queen Victoria was still alive. So I'm pretty old. But you can push it forward to the Fukushima incident. You can push it forward to a lot of different problems that we've been having this year. There's the one in the Gulf of Mexico that blew up some years ago. So you take those examples from the Brundtland report, you pass it forward, but it's exactly the same things that are happening. So read the entire Brundtland report, very important. It focuses on discontinuity, but it doesn't really tell you how to link those things. Remember the Brundtland report, it was generated by Madam Brundtland, Rob Brundtland, and through stakeholder consultation with a lot of different academics and people from government. The problem with the Brundtland report is that if you take it to, for example, a public buyer, and you tell them this generation and next generation, then you could be like, yeah, so what? How do I bring that to my day-to-day operations? And it's a really powerful definition, but you cannot operationalize it. Okay? Then we have the holistic perspective. And in this one, you explicitly combine the integrational and the intergenerational. So you have the three dimensions, economic, environmental, and social, and you add the time dimension, and then you put them in a big pot, you mix it around there, and you do your hocus pocus, and everything comes out. Okay, and you propose two dynamic and simultaneous equilibria. One is economic, environmental, and social, and the next one is within the temporal aspects of sustainability. And then you end up with something like this. And for that, you need to smoke a lot of different things and not be very well in your mind. So here, what you would do is, so imagine if you have the three circles on the concentric circle, or the three ones on the juxtaposed ones. So if you push them all together and you rotate them so they're all combining, and then you take them on time and you push them forward on time. Say, okay, I've already combined them, they're all balanced, they're all really beautifully connected, and then I push them on time. The problem is that this generation's needs are not the same as future generations' needs. So you need to start considering the generation needs of the past, the present, and the future. So that cylinder that you have implodes in itself, and you end up with something like this. Because everything is connected. Economic issues are connected to environmental issues, to social issues, to the time issues of yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and the next day, and the next day. Okay, so on that, we can posit that SD, sustainable development, is a change process in which societies improve the quality of life, reaching a dynamic equilibrium between the economic, environmental, and social dimensions. And that has to be from this generation and future ones. So we talk about 4 dimensions of sustainability and their interactions. So not just one, not just economic, environmental, and social, but we have the time dimension and how they all interact. So we have these 4 dimensions. And on top of that, we have actors or stakeholders. And very simplistically done, we have civil society. That includes, for example, the football club, your cycling club, the churches, and anything that is kind of civil society. We have your corporations, from small and medium-sized enterprises to big, huge national and transnational corporations, and we have the public sector. And they are all interlinked. And sustainable public procurement is usually and traditionally seen in this juxtaposition. But we also need to consider that that affects civil society. So we need to start moving from just looking into this to looking into the entire part of sustainability and taking into consideration all of that. So we cannot look into sustainable public procurement just saying it's going to save the environment. Yeah, but how much is it going to cost today, tomorrow, and the next day? And that's where we're going to have life cycle assessment later on, and we're going to have examples, and we're going to have a number of things today and tomorrow. Okay. Thank you very much. We have time for some questions, right? Yeah, that's fine. I mean, my intention is that we have about 5 minutes break in between sessions. Yes. Yeah.
This for me, the one dimension of time that we spoke about is a bit more time with not familiar with that. Could you please give an example of how the miscalculation of this dimension, for example, in the past generation could negatively affect ours? Or by analogy, how if we do not take this into consideration today, it would affect in the future?
Yes, for sure. I mean, the time dimension, as I said, is one of the most important and yet the most forgotten one. When Maria said the origins of sustainable development in the forest, forestry in Germany and in Sweden, is if I plant a forest today, how much time does it take for a tree to grow? One tree. Okay, but then if you already have the forest, you have several options, right? You can keep the forest as it is, but you're not going to make any money. You can cut the entire forest and you're going to make a lot of money and you're going to provide a lot of jobs. But then you're not going to have a forest later on. Or you can cut some trees and provide some jobs, but have that continuity of jobs and continuity of the forest for 10 years, 100 years, 150 years. So that was the original definition of sustainable development. Now, if you look at it right now, how do we take care of our old in Europe? Let's take a bit more extreme case. How do they take care of their old in the US? Send them to Florida. That's pretty much what people do. It's a nice weather, you have enough oranges, they don't bother you. But what happens when you get rid of that old generation? Now let's go to Italy. Well, how do people take care of their old in Italy? Tell them, come live with me, more or less, or you move in to live with them, either way. And that gives you the opportunity to exchange information, to exchange knowledge. And that is part of the time dimension. So how do we transfer that knowledge from the old generations to now? How do we transfer the knowledge that I have collected studying sustainability to you over there? So that's what we need about the time dimension. When you talk about public procurement, and you will see that tomorrow with Sigrid and Annette from the region, you need to plan that you buy things not only for today. So the chairs that you're sitting in, they're not going to last one day. They're going to last 3 years. And depending on which accountant you have, maybe 3 years, and then you depreciate it and you need to buy a new one. Or if you talk to somebody who's more sustainability oriented, well, I can have one of these chairs lasting for, well, they're not IKEA chairs, so they might last for a little bit longer. But you can have them last for 200 years, 2,000 years. There are chairs, I mean, look at the Roman roads. They've lasted for 2,000 years. New roads, they're full of potholes. And that's when we talk about the time dimension. We talk about things that are going to last and that can be repaired, that can be refurbished, and that can be remanufactured. That's what we need about the time dimension. We need to talk about how much is it going to cost us economically, environmentally, and socially. Yes. Okay, there was another microphone somewhere. Yeah, we have 2 microphones, one for each section or whatever.
Hi, thank you. I would like a question that I would like to know, according to your personal opinions, perspective, normatively speaking, do you think the sustainability or sustainable development is better to be used as a concept which is quite flexible, or should be considered as a principle which is legally binding?
On my personal opinion,
Yeah.
It has to be much more flexible. You, of course, need to back it up with some regulation and then legislation, because you cannot leave it completely open. But that depends what type of regulation you're going to be setting up and what type of context you have. So, for example, if we talk about green chemistry, as I say, it's written in the book, you have a lot of chemical industries in Europe. Some are doing great things for sustainability, some are not. So you need to put a minimum, saying this is the minimum you need to do, but you need to also allow the flexibility and the voluntarism of sustainability for other people and other companies to do more. Because if you restrict it way too much, you end up in strong sustainability, and people are going to say, well, I just have to follow the regulations, I still have to follow the legislation, and the legislation in Europe and in many countries takes a lot of time to develop it and ratify it. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know how you call these things. So it takes a long time, but sometimes companies and civil society is a lot quicker. So you look at a company says, tomorrow we're doing it. Fine, here's the money. A university, tomorrow we're doing it. That means next year or 2 years from now. If you talk about churches, and I'm talking in general, tomorrow we're doing it, it might mean 50 years. Okay, it might mean. So it should be a combination of both. Yeah. Yeah, but you need it for the recording. Organizations. We're going to be talking about them later on in systems thinking, but an organization it can be formal, it can be informal. So Sapiens is an organization, is a formal organization set up within a project, and you are all part of that. An organization can be a university, can be a church, can be a company, can be a public sector organization. So when we talk, for example, of government, we talk about the government, but that has to be made of several organizations. So it's what we can call the meso level. So the micro level would be us, and the macro level is government or a region, but you need something in between. And as I said, it can be formal, can be informal, it can be a football club, it can be anything. And I have a few papers on organizational sustainability if you're interested. Okay, one final question before we all stretch our legs.
Not a question, but more of a comment. I missed power. You show stakeholders and actors, but they have a different power.
Mhm.
And so that will make the concept will be even more dynamic. And then a second comment, what I missed was, I do understand the discussion on sustainability, but it kind of always lacks for me the question of what economic system are we in? Will capitalism actually allow for specific economic differences that would drive, for example, down profit margins? Is it something that is capable of thinking within capitalism, and how will the power structures fight against it, basically?
Power, we discussed it in ATC3 with stakeholders, so you missed that session. But it is an important part, and that's something that tends to be discussed within stakeholder theories or power and influence and things like that. So yeah, I don't think we'll discuss power in this session, in this ATC. But we discuss a little bit about economic systems, and I think on collaboration we talk about yes, slightly on that. We used to have 2 economic systems, and now we have one that is evolved into many different ones. So we talk about capitalism, kind of the US, UK type of style, but the UK is not really exactly the same as the US. And then we have kind of the continental Europe, then we have kind of the Nordic capitalism, then we have a Japanese capitalism, we have the Chinese capitalism, and then is it 1, is it 2? I don't know, and I don't know where we're going in that sense and how it's going to evolve. But that's something that we need to discuss, not over fika, but over drinks probably. Okay, may I suggest that we all stand up for about 5 minutes? There's some water, there's some fruit outside. And also I would like to welcome Jakob Nowoka, who's department head. He's been helping us organize this with Camila. You might have met Camila. So Jakob, thanks for joining us. Yeah. Sapiens, Jakob Sapiens. Sí, gracias. Voy a parar el recording.